A tariff is a tax on an imported good. Just like you pay a sales tax when you buy something at a store, you pay a tariff when you import something into the US. For example, if there's a tariff on foreign cars and you just bought a brand new Mercedes, you'll have to pay the tariff to Uncle Sam to be able to release your new car from US Customs. And for much of the early days of the United States, tariffs funded most of the federal government, as much as 95% of its total revenue. Throughout the 1800s, most American presidents supported heavy tariffs, as it was forcing the United States to become more self sufficient and creating record profits for American industry. The only problem, however, is that all of these profits during what was called the Gilded Age were going straight to the business owners, a very, very small group of elites who controlled more than half of the wealth in the country. Unfortunately, these elites invested the wealth incredibly poorly, leading to a stock market crash and the first Great Depression of 1873. The robber barons still had more money than they could ever spend in their lifetimes, but the average American was really suffering at this point, with unemployment rates hitting nearly 50% in some states. So, unprecedented times called for unprecedented actions, and America's farmers, having been hurt the worst by the Depression, formed a new political party, the People's Party.
The People's Party thought of the economic problems in America a little bit like this. Imagine you're playing a game of Monopoly. As the game goes on, more and more of the board gets bought up until really one or two players own most of the properties, and everybody else keeps landing on their spaces, paying triple rent for all the hotels. Eventually, the losing players have to mortgage their properties if they want to keep playing. That is, however, unless they get a community chest card. And the People's Party argued that that's kind of what the American economy needed, a check on the profits of the steel companies, of the railroads, of the big banks, a way to bring that money that went to like 10 to 20 people and recirculate it into the community. They wanted to find a way to tax capital. And this idea continued to circulate for years, but was never brought up by a president until the progressive Teddy Roosevelt took office. Roosevelt believed that a good way to collect tax revenue could be through an inheritance tax. The argument at the time being, if you're fortunate enough to inherit a lot of money or a lot of land, you owe it to society to give at least some percentage of it back. And Roosevelt also thought that the inheritance tax could be accompanied by something else, an income tax.
It is important that the nation should not only be stable and prosperous, but that its prosperity should be equitably distributed. We grudge no man a fortune in civil life if it is honorably and obtained and well used, but the fortune should not be such as to create a swollen aristocracy dangerous to the public.
Now, let me be clear, Roosevelt wasn't interested in imposing these hefty income taxes on steel workers, farmers, or shopkeepers, but he was interested in taxing what he called
the really big fortune. This swollen fortune, by the mere fact of its size, acquires qualities which differentiate it in kind as well as in degree from what is possessed by men of relatively small means. Therefore, I believe in a graduated income tax on big fortunes.
Roosevelt's successor, William Taft, called for Congress to draft the 16th Amendment, and they did. And now there's a check on the American aristocracy. Big profits from big companies are taxed, and big incomes to big individuals are as well, and that money is used to build things like canals, roads, to construct pensions for veterans, and of course, for war. Now, during the time of World War I, income taxes didn't replace tariffs, but they were often used in tandem, with the rates of tariffs staying relatively stable throughout the years, with the Republican Party of the early 20th century occasionally inching up the tax by just a percent or two. But when the stock market crashed in the fall of 1929, America was once again slipping into a depression, and Europe too. Over there, however, they had a more radical approach. Fascism exploded across Europe, and the logic across countries like Italy, Spain, and Germany went a little bit like this.
My country used to be great. I heard stories about a country that feels like it doesn't even exist anymore. Nowadays, this place is full of foreigners. We're losing our identity, and we look weak. Capitalism's full of greed, communism doesn't work, democracy is full of idiots making stupid decisions they know nothing about. If only a leader could say the things we're all thinking.
You know what the problem is? Seems interesting, but he doesn't have a catchy slogan. Okay, we're in.
Great. You'll be needing this.
Then they killed about 40 million people. The US, on the other hand, continued to raise their income taxes, built up a huge army, and went and kicked some Nazi ass. All the while, the fascist regimes of Europe enacted heavy protectionist tariffs, and the United States had a completely different outlook on world trade. Americans were starting to think, the world is getting a lot smaller and more interconnected than it used to be, so we'd probably be a lot better off if we had less restrictive trade between us and our allies especially. With the war won, the United States promoted something that they called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which later became the World Trade Organization. Some US tariffs on things like raw materials remained in place, but more and more manufactured goods were available to be imported into the US free from excise. And this was great for a while. American goods were being exported and foreign goods were being imported at a rate never before seen. Americans were driving foreign cars, buying radios from Japan, and enjoying the benefits of a more globalized, interconnected world. But the honeymoon period didn't last long. In the late 60s, Israel invaded Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and the United States funded and supported these operations, and several others in the coming years, leading 9 countries in the Middle East and several others around the world to enact an embargo on American oil. This led to a huge energy crisis in the 1970s, and the price of oil skyrocketed. Gasoline became more expensive, but so did plastics, air travel, and industrial manufacturing. The economic crisis led to a big problem for America's factories, which were having trouble staying profitable with energy becoming so expensive. All the while, global trade was making foreign alternatives cheaper and cheaper seemingly by the day, especially with gasoline becoming so expensive. Japanese car and steel imports exploded, practically killing the US cities of Pittsburgh and Detroit in the process, with thousands of American jobs disappearing. Presidents of both political parties at this time were generally against tariffs, with both Reagan and Clinton being largely in favor of free, unrestricted trade. They did both, however, impose trade restrictions on the amount of steel that the US could import in an attempt to save the country's dying industry. George W. Bush imposed light tariffs on Chinese steel products, and Barack Obama actually raised them to 500%, effectively guaranteeing that American steel was the cheapest option on the market, or at least trying to. Both Trump and Biden raised tariffs on solar panels, foreign electronics, and steel. So, do the tariffs work to boost American manufacturing, or do they just lead to economic spirals and depressions? Well, the answer's kind of both, depending on the tariff. Tariffs work when the United States already has the ability to produce the thing that they want to import. For example, if we have a bunch of iron mines here, a tariff on imported iron will force Americans and American companies to buy domestic iron. But let's say we don't make any Russian nesting dolls in America, but we really want to for some reason. So we impose a tariff of 50% on all nesting dolls coming from Russia. The only problem is, nobody in America has a nesting doll factory, so we're gonna have to make one. And even after we do, the American nesting dolls aren't the same as the Russian ones. They don't have the same authenticity. So people just keep buying the Russian ones, but at a price 50% more expensive than it used to be. Tariffs make imported goods more expensive, and again, the tariff isn't paid by the person exporting that good to the US, it's paid by the person releasing it from customs. And that's fine if you can produce enough quality domestic alternatives, but if you can't, prices will increase, and that can be dangerous, especially during times of economic hardship. That's partially why heavy tariffs can run the risk of spiraling the economy into a depression. I said that President Obama's 500% tariffs on steel were meant to make American steel cheaper than imported steel. But the reality is, imported steel is still cheaper than American steel just because of our aging infrastructure. Steel can be produced in other countries way more efficiently and with way less energy and way faster than it can with our current steel mills in America. And that's actually partially Nippon Steel's logic for wanting to invest in US steel to upgrade their infrastructure to 21st century, more environmentally friendly, and more efficient and faster steelmaking. There's been so much talk about tariffs lately, with a lot of people on all different sides of politics taking very hardline stances about tariffs, but in reality, it's way more nuanced than that. We've seen presidents of both parties be both for and against tariffs at different times in history, and they can be both beneficial and detrimental, depending on a variety of factors. But honestly, I'm happy to see these things brought up again. Tariffs, after all, were pretty much the only way the federal government made money until they started taxing excess capital. And while a few basic tariffs stuck around, they were quite low for most of the 20th century, especially after World War II when America adopted that free trade mindset. But presidents of all ideologies have, in recent years, recognized the ability of the tariff to both generate federal revenue and bolster American manufacturing. I'm not going to deliberate my thoughts and opinions on modern politics right now. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. Will some of the tariffs Trump is proposing strengthen our industry? Might some of them screw with the economy? Who's to say? You can let us know your thoughts and opinions down below. If you were president, how would you structure your tariffs, or would you focus on a more free trade approach like Reagan and Clinton did? With so many crazy things in the headlines every day, you can always feel a little bit more informed if you just look back in history and see how we've dealt with these kinds of situations before. And we're here to help you out along the way. We're those history guys.